This is BlissVille, Misadventures in BlissVille. I'm David Lawler. Across from me is my lovely wife of nearly 15 years, Bronwyn Knox. Say hi to the audience, Bronwyn.
Hi to the audience, Bronwyn.
She's so clever. Don't you love her? On March 20... sorry. Totally fucked that up. Sorry. On March 14th, 2015, Robert Durst was arrested in New Orleans on a first-degree murder warrant issued by the Los Angeles Police Department. If convicted in California for the murder of Susan Berman, Durst could face the death penalty for special circumstances of murder of a witness and lying in wait. Yeah, that's the whole story of Robert Durst. But this came after the final episode of Andrew Direcky's rather compelling documentary for HBO, The Jinx, The Life and Deaths of Robert Durst, wherein they had evidently wrapped their interview with Durst after one last discussion regarding the similarities between an anonymous letter sent to cops and a letter he wrote to Susan Berman, I believe. So the Associated Press reported that a March 1999 letter from Durst to Berman, discovered by Berman's stepson and turned over to filmmakers during their research in that episode, provided key new evidence, in quotes, leading to the filing of the murder charges. So Bronwyn and I just finished watching the documentary. First, I want to ask you about Robert Durst. What's your take on him?
Okay, before I start with that, I want to say that our cat, Siren, has entered the room, and she's on the table with us right now.
How's it going, buddy? How you doing? Oh, here she comes. Give me a little... Hi. How you doing?
So, sorry, back to Robert Durst.
Little surprise performance there from our cat.
From our cat, yeah. That's a pretty big question, but the documentary was excellent. My take on Robert Durst, I kind of would love to know what's wrong with him.
What do you mean by what's wrong?
Well, I mean...
You sense... is this based on his interview alone? Like, if you didn't know anything about him, and you were just watching this interview... or is it about the history behind it and then the interview and connection? Well,
actually, yeah. If I just thought about just the interview, watching him sitting there, he did seem to have like a facial tic, something really weird going on with his eyes the entire time. Right. But you were saying, oh, it's just the lights in his eyes. But I don't quite buy that.
So how does he present himself in the documentary and in the reality we see? Because for me... thinking about it now, he appears to be of two minds. This is all hindsight, but I believe we see two people: the one from history and the man being interviewed. So, what's your idea? What's your opinion on that one? Are we looking at two people?
Well, there's really no way of knowing that, because if you're being interviewed, you're going to behave differently no matter who you are. But my theory,
but you are absolutely nothing like the person I'm actually talking to right now. You are a completely different person.
I'm not saying that. I know you, so I'm comfortable with you, but I don't think he knew the director as well as I know you. But no, don't you remember, as we were watching the documentary, I was sitting next to you and I looked at you and I said, is it possible this guy has a dissociative personality disorder? So when you say he's of two minds, my feeling is that might almost literally be true in his case.
Yep. But that might be that standard old thing about human beings, is that we are always of two mind, duality, the Jungian thing, you know, occasionally we go back, when we are dealt with we are dealt a situation or asked a question, we go and check in with our demons, and then we come back. It's like
that might be, but I think it runs a little deeper in his case.
Now, I'm thinking that if he is indeed guilty of the crimes he committed, horrific murders, first his wife Kathleen, then his friend Susan, then his neighbor, both of those crimes, in my opinion, would have been committed to remove possible obstacles to his continued freedom. Right. I think his neighbor figured out he wasn't a woman. He concealed his identity in Galveston, Texas, wore wigs and dresses, appeared as a female with a female's name and identity.
Yeah, what is that about? I mean, if you're him, oh, sorry, I think our daughter is also making a guest appearance. Can we, I was about to make a really brilliant point, and I've got my daughter shouting "mommy" in the background.
Make your point. Make your point first.
My point was, what about that? If he wanted to just disguise his identity, he certainly could have done it as another guy. He's rich. He didn't need to wear the wig. That just furthers my theory that he might have a dissociative personality disorder, and one of those personalities
just because
could
he
be
wanted
a
to dress up as a woman? No, but nobody would expect, like the Spanish Inquisition from Monty Python, nobody would expect a woman.
Yeah, but actually, that was kind of one of the only amusing things in the whole documentary. Not that it was meant to be funny, but the fact that the guy that was the landlord in the apartment in Texas said,
Klaus,
yeah, he was like, well, he was a woman, but he wasn't he said the tenant was a woman, but not a very attractive woman. He was like this unattractive middle-aged woman.
Yeah,
and duh.
Right.
He didn't as a woman. Robert Durst was not very attractive.
So he would have killed Susan Berman because she might have known and helped him cover up the murder of his wife. That was another thing. So those two most recent murders were basically to keep the cops away or something like that. Something along those lines. He was in danger. It was a fight or flight type thing. Whereas Kathleen might have been just complete, I'm doing this, and that's about it. Let's pause here so that Bronwyn can go and see to Regan. And for crying out loud, she's probably being picked up on the mic.
Might be.
How's it going, Siren? How you doing? You want to talk a little bit? Go hop up on the chair there and take the mic. If he is indeed guilty, what that means is that we are witnessing an extremely docile-looking man. He's on the small side, who, he's capable of extremely vicious, violent acts. His first wife, Kathleen, had written in a diary, who keeps a diary, number one, that he struck her several times throughout their marriage. In interviews, in his personality, he doesn't seem vicious or violent. Of course, why would he? So this is where I was starting to think schizophrenia. And defined in the Wikipedia, schizophrenia is a mental disorder often characterized by abnormal social behavior and failure to recognize what is real. Common symptoms include false beliefs, unclear or confused thinking, auditory hallucinations, reduced social engagement, and emotional expression and inactivity.
But you were also the person who told me that schizophrenics aren't usually violent?
Not usually, no. Most cases, schizophrenia and what we're going to talk about later, DID, are not really manifest in violent impulses. It's mostly about confusion. It's mostly about, because in our rational minds, we're not used to hearing other voices, and we're not used to dealing with other personalities in our heads. So we tend to be confused, withdrawn. We stay away from people. So some of the attributes and symptoms could be applied to Robert Durst, but they could be also applied to just about everybody I know. That's the short end of it. Durst never appears unclear or confused. He seems to be an introvert, but he's got reason to be. He's fairly active. Putting on a dress and a wig to achieve a distraction or effect in order to elude authorities is a fairly active cognitive quality. It's not something that really strikes me as out there. He's obviously doing this to escape authorities.
What about stealing that sandwich?
Now, that was an unusual thing, yeah. Early on, we find out that, he pops up back on the radar because he goes into a supermarket and steals a chicken salad sandwich. Meanwhile, he's got over $500 in his pocket and $30,000 in his car in cash. He could have bought this stuff. We're going to talk a little bit about dissociative identity disorder, or DID. Previously known as multiple personality disorder. They don't call it anymore, that term. It's a mental disorder on the dissociative spectrum characterized by at least two distinct and relatively enduring identities or dissociative personality states that alternately control a person's behavior, and is accompanied by memory impairment for important information not explained by ordinary forgetfulness. He does seem to have that quality because you notice he says a lot, I don't remember, or something like that. Or maybe that's just his way of getting past questions.
Could be, yeah. Well, not only, you're telling me the definition of dissociative personality disorder, but another thing I noticed, and I was talking to my mom about this on the phone because she watched it too, but he seems, when he's talking about the events that happened, he seems disassociated from them in the sense that he's not emotional about them. He seems really detached.
Yeah, he's very cold. He does not, you never see him shed a single tear. He's almost reptilian.
Right.
And then he has the crazy twitch that we were talking about. Now, you were talking to your mom about this. Now, what did she think of Durst? Did she think he's guilty as hell?
She kind of did. She said, when I first heard the end of the documentary, when he confessed, I was so shocked. She goes, and then I thought, maybe he's being sarcastic, which is kind of the same thing I thought. Like, there was a certain way he said it. He was like, yeah, I killed them all. Because he realized after the filmmaker had confronted him with the 2 samples of handwriting that they were saying were identical.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it did sound to me kind of like he was going in the bathroom. And first of all, he was talking about himself in the third person.
Yeah, he does that.
Which,
you said something about that, too, that being significant.
Well, it was just just going into my theory, just...
the Jimmy, it's like...
Yeah, but no, not...
He's the Bobby.
I don't think he was doing it like that, like Jimmy, in an egotistical way. It just fed into my theory.
I think Jimmy might have had a few problems, too. But anyway.
It fed into my theory of the dissociative personality disorder, like they were discussing, like he was discussing with himself what happened. But then the other part, we thought maybe he's being sarcastic about being caught. Like maybe he's that arrogant he doesn't think that he's really caught with those handwriting samples. I don't know. So my mom did think, at first she thought he was innocent of the 2 women dying. She thought he was innocent of
just
the 2 women.
Those first few parts of the movie, and she's like watching this, and just,
right. But she was interested.
Bad coincidence. He's just unlucky.
Yeah, exactly. She did think that, but of course she knew he killed the Morris Black in Galveston, Texas. But she actually was interested in my theory about the dissociative personality disorder.
So in popular culture, we think Norman Bates, right? He dresses up as his mother, behaves as his mother, and murders people as his mother. Norman blacks out. He awakens, realizes his mother has killed, and then covers up her crimes, which are really his own. Could it be that Durst is either rightfully protesting his innocence or is covering up crimes another personality existing inside his mind committed?
That's my theory. It could be, because the other thing that was strange was that weird list that he wrote.
Right. Okay. Now, this was in the first part. The first part of this documentary was about his arrest for the murder of this old guy, Morris Black, in Galveston, Texas. In the back of his car, strangely, it's very strange. In the back of his car, they find a bow saw, and they find a list. Money, keys, comb, lighter, bow saw, garbage bags, all the stuff that usually... Okay, now, devil's advocate, you did this.
Right.
Would you leave that list there?
Or the bow saw. I mean, obviously...
And, okay, Morris Black's ID. For some reason, Morris Black's fucking driver's license was in there. Now, would you do this?
Well, yeah, he's supposed to be very intelligent, so you would think he would think to get rid of those things out of his car, unless in some way he wanted them to be found, or some part of him wanted them to be found.
Some part. And that leads into the letter later on.
Right. And the list was just bizarre. It was like a weird stream of consciousness type thing, which, again, if you didn't want to be caught, you would destroy that in some way.
Let's move on to the series itself, The Jinx, The Life and Deaths of Robert Durst, as directed by Andrew Jarecki.
Okay.
In 2010, Jarecki made a movie called All Good Things, a fictionalized version of the Durst story that's starring Ryan Gosling, Kirsten Dunst, Frank Langella, Kristen Wiig, Philip Baker Hall, and Diane Venora, one of my favorite actresses. We have a filmmaker obviously very interested in the subject matter, and from what we see in The Jinx, he was approached by Durst himself after seeing the movie and wanted to give an interview, something along those lines. So Andrew Jarecki is a talented filmmaker who had burst onto the documentary scene with a movie that we both watched called Capturing the Friedmans. It was about a child molestation case on Great Neck, Long Island that got nationwide headlines in 1987. The film is a devastating look at a family destroyed by the allegations alone, not even a trial. And I'm a bit of a tragedy junkie myself. So I'm interested in how things fall apart, and so I thought Capturing the Friedmans was a chilling and invigorating documentary at the same time. So The Jinx is a different beast. Because in Capturing the Friedmans, Arnold Friedman, you feel bad for him. You really do, because you feel that there is a witch hunt in Long Island in the wake of a lot of hysteria that accompanies child molestation investigations as a result of things like the McMartin trial, and you really feel that he was destroyed ultimately. Just by the allegations alone, those are enough to kill anyone. So with this movie, though, he pursues a character that from the outset looks guilty anyway.
Right.
Looks like a bad guy. But obviously, more money was spent on this movie than was on capturing the Friedmans. Jarecki hired actors to film dramatic reenactments. It's also beautifully photographed. Lots of slow tracking shots. Slow motion, which kind of gets on my nerves, especially over the course of a 4-hour running time. While we were watching, I remember telling you that if I were making this documentary, and I have made documentaries before, I would get rid of all this rubbish. I understand the severity of the crimes, but we don't need the points, the actions of the participants repeatedly demonstrated to us.
And how many times did we see the Katona train station in the movie?
Yes. And also Susan Berman, the actress playing Susan Berman, falling slowly after she's been shot on the ground. The personal recollections and crime scene photos work just fine for me. But it's like somebody's telling you the story of how they drank a glass of orange juice, and then right away we cut to an actor opening a refrigerator door in slow motion, retrieving a carton of orange juice, slow dissolve to finding a glass in the cupboard, and then another slow dissolve to pouring of the orange juice. It gets to be a bit much. What did you think of the movie, other than the pertinent facts and all of his cinematic embellishments?
Events of the movie. No, I agree. We could have lived without that. It was maybe not the most interesting part. It's actually the interviews with the people who had to meet him and interact with him was better than that. Yeah.
What I like were the personalities. There's some very strange. Durst is an unusual character in himself, but what about his wife? His current wife, Deborah Chartrand, I believe her name. She's so
I asked you about that. I was like, well, why would you, knowing that there's some speculation that we don't know what happened to his first wife, why would you marry him and be like,
it's funny,
you might end up in a ditch somewhere, you don't know.
Doesn't it seem to you that if there was a crime in your family or something like that, or someone you knew, someone you were married to maybe, I think you would have a different reaction as you were being questioned by authorities.
Then his second wife did?
His wife was like, she thought this whole thing was a joke. Did you see her? I mean, she was like laughing and smiling. I mean, who would do that?
Yeah, she was a little different herself too. She had a strange, tough vibe about her. I don't know. I can't really explain it.
She looked like she'd seen a few things in her life, yes, but
right.
But I'm more concerned with the fact that she was like, she was cracking jokes, during being interviewed. I understand maybe that might be her reinforcement, in the middle of all this. But
maybe
I really felt like she did not care. I really felt like all that mattered to her really was his money. He signed away power of attorney to her.
It could be that she just married him for his money, so she just took her chances about her possible doom. But it's also possible that she wasn't taking it seriously because she didn't really think that he really did it, or that anything like that he would ever be caught, that anything like this could happen. She seemed kind of incredulous. I don't know.
Very much so. Those interesting personalities and those people like the Galveston lawyers and Texas law and all that stuff, hilarious. I mean, but when you think about it, you're looking at a guy who possibly, we can't even say that he actually did it. We just have to say allegedly that he did it. Committed crimes in 3 different states.
Right.
New York State, Beverly Hills, California, and Texas. So he's like a national murderer kind of guy.
Well, if they ever find his wife's body, that'll go a long way.
I don't think that's ever going to happen. It was 1982 when she disappeared, But
it's got to be somewhere. There's got to be.
I don't know if there's any evidence. There's no way. I don't think there's any way to find Kathleen Durst. Not at all.
That's interesting because that if theoretically that was his first murder, so why was he so much better at covering that up and hiding that body?
Because he was younger, maybe quicker.
He got worse at it as he went along. Usually, you get better with practice.
Yeah, with practice, maybe. So aside from those very interesting characters that they interview in the movie, that to me was the best part of it, was dealing with those different personalities. So as we move forward in these episodes, Jarecki holds back a little bit on those cinematic shots in parts 4 and 5. Part 5 is closer to a cinema verite documentary style that I was expecting to see. So we're following Jarecki around as he gathers up leads. He does his own detective work, which is what a documentary filmmaker does. Part 4 begins the story we're seeing now and it's pretty sly. Jarecki interviews Durst, and they take a break. And Durst unwittingly starts talking to himself, and the microphone is on. His lawyer comes in and tells him they can hear him talking to himself on the microphone. And Durst just says he was just collecting his thoughts. He talks to himself, right? But this would obviously lead into the final episode. And if you've been following the news the last week, you know what that is. In part 5, Jarecki tries, without success, to interview Durst's brother Douglas. Durst himself gets in on the mischief by basically walking around the city on various properties before getting run off by lumbering, fairly clueless security people. He stands in front of his brother's home to no avail, trying to get attention. He winds up getting arrested for that. For some reason, I have no idea why he would want to do that.
Why? Who would want to do what? Why his brother would want to?
Why Robert Durst would want to, number one, antagonize his brother, and number two, climb up the stairs and I guess get arrested for that.
I didn't quite get that. Was there some kind of an order of protection against him coming up to... Okay.
That's why he was arrested. He violated that because they caught him on camera.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And Douglas is scared to death of his brother, which is really funny to me because if you look at the video footage, this isn't like some spry, athletic maniac out to kill you. This is like an old man having a hard time getting up those stairs.
That's how he appears to people, yeah.
So we discussed the concept of narcissism to some extent. Now, isn't narcissism supposed to be a symptom or an indicator of sociopathy?
Is it? I mean, it's a mental illness of its own, isn't it?
I don't know that it's an illness because, narcissism is alive and well and living in the year 2015.
Doesn't mean it's not an illness.
If Durst is a sociopath, would that be an indicator of either schizophrenia or DID? That's what I wonder. Or are we looking at a very veritable Three Stooges syndrome of neuropathic disorders? This is why...
You think he has every possible...
This is why Durst is so fascinating to me. I don't know what's going on in his head, and I want to know. I want to see that very dark soul, the possible violence, and outbursts of malevolence, and if he doesn't reveal that side to himself in any way, then he's the greatest poker player in the universe. He does tend to play that game very well in the final part of the series, part 6, of the Jinx, while being interviewed by Jarecki. So, part 6 is composed of the filmmaker, Andrew Jarecki's nervousness. Now that, to me, is finally what a filmmaker is. A ball of angry, energetic nerves waiting. That's what they do. They worry. They're setting up, and Durst pulls the plug on the interview 100 times. I can't do it because I'm in Madrid or Barcelona or whatever. I'm very far away from anything you want to accomplish right now. But he has the idea that Jarecki's planning on pulling out these letters.
So he knows what's going to happen. Okay.
He says to Jarecki, I have an idea on what you're planning on doing.
Oh, okay.
All right, now there's 2 letters. One to his friend Susan Berman and one to the cops with similar handwriting. A block print where the word Beverly is misspelled. Beverly as in Beverly Hills, but misspelled with an extra E. So...
Right.
When Durst initially looks at the handwriting samples, he says they're identical. But then he starts to backtrack, and I wonder if schizophrenia, if DID, is off the board. If we have a cold, calculating method killer.
See, but the note in and of itself he sent to the cops, is that anything... If you were so cold and calculating, why would you send that note? It seems like some other part of his personality trying to... correct what the other bits are doing. To me, none of that
Norman Bates
took away from my theory of the possibility of DID. Norman Bates and his mother. Yeah, something like that. Like, because if he really didn't want to get caught, why would he send a note to the cops that said cadaver? You would pretend like you would just not do anything to draw attention to it. You would let the body stay there undiscovered for as long as humanly possible, obviously.
There is a thing. There's also this. I understand that he interviewed a lot of people in this case, and a lot of these people agree 100% that he's guilty. So when you believe that someone's guilty, you're going to manufacture guilt in your head when you're looking at new evidence.
Sure, of course.
And this really is new evidence. If your mind is made up, oh, yeah, he definitely did that. The thing is, I look at the note, Okay, and also I have to say this right away. Drecke skewed the results. He gave the notes to a handwriting analyst, but he gave him the information behind it. He gave him the background. All I would do is give him these two separate pieces and say, are they identical? Yes or no? If not, if so, why?
Right, without telling him the circumstances, no context whatsoever, and then see what he says, as opposed to setting up the context first and then giving him the notes.
Yeah, he kind of fudged that data already. Because it takes a little bit of remembering, but you're going to remember this murder case, especially if you're in crime, if you work in criminal detection.
Okay, I could see that.
Now, looking at the two notes, there are remarkable similarities, but there are also remarkable differences.
Right.
And you picked up on a couple of them.
Well, the angles of the L's and the E's. If you're just writing something really quickly, you pretty much do the angle that your wrist is comfortable doing, yeah.
Now, E is the most commonly used letter in the alphabet when you're writing, when you're doing anything, whatever words you're saying. E is the most common. I know this because...
because the E on your keyboard is broken?
Not that. Not necessarily that. Actually, the first electric typewriters I ever had, I had 3 or 4, and they all died in succession because the first letter to break was...
The E?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, the thing about the E's is the middle portion of the E, the little guy in the middle that sticks out. Okay. On the letter. Actually, okay, on the note to the cops, the E goes up. That little bit goes up. In the letter to Susan Berman, that little bit goes down. Okay? The L, I believe, the L on the letter to the cops has it bends a little bit, the little, what do you call that thing? That little bit at the bottom there.
I don't have a name for it. It's just a little bit at the bottom of the foot. Okay.
The foot of the L bends upward and kind of curves in a very delicate little arc.
Okay.
Both of them do.
Okay, so what do you think? Do you think a completely different person wrote the other letter, or a completely different personality wrote the other letter?
Okay, if you want to advance crazy, paranoid conspiracy theories, whoever had seen a letter that Robert Durst wrote to Susan Berman, tried to duplicate his handwriting,
you think
was aware of Susan Berman's murder, but I'm not really sure about that. But also, Susan Berman's murder kind of raises eyebrows anyway, because she was obviously in a bad financial situation, was borrowing enormous amounts of money.
Yeah.
I mean, like when we borrow in our day, we borrowed a couple $1,000, and this is 2015. This is 15 years ago. She was borrowing amounts in the range of $50,000, $5,000. She was borrowing enormous amounts of money. So I'm wondering, what is she supporting exactly? Because she's just one person. She's living in a tiny little house in Beverly Hills. Yeah, it was in Beverly Hills, but still, it kind of looked crappy. It looked like a really shabby-looking house.
She didn't really have any furniture or anything.
No.
Yeah.
She had a desk and a computer, and she was a writer. And writers don't really make that much money. And of course, writers are creatures of excess, so they tend to have addictions, whatever it was. She also had mob connections. Her father was in the mafia. She was shot in the back of the head. Now, Durst, however crafty he might be, he doesn't strike me as a back-of-the-head kind of guy. Although we never saw Morris Black's head, so we never know how he actually died.
It was right. One of the points that they made in the documentary is that it sort of looked like a mob hit.
Yeah. And the thing is, she has connections in the mob. She wrote about being, she was like a mafia princess, I guess, when she was younger. It's not like I'm going out there and saying that somebody else did this and they're just trying to frame Robert Durst, but Jesus Christ, you could really, if you wanted to do something, you're in luck, because you could just frame every little story on Robert Durst.
You can frame it for a lot more murders, sure.
You could figure out maybe eventually he was responsible for the bombing of the World Trade Center. But the thing is, the documentary never makes those points. It's all about, he did it.
Right.
It's all about, I know he did it. I know the son of a bitch did it, and he'll never confess.
And they don't go into any of the possibilities we are discussing about there being anything mentally wrong with him.
No, they don't.
At the beginning, they tell this horrible story about his mother's death, which, frankly, I think would mess just about anyone up.
But the thing is, you had reservations about that as well. He talked about how he saw his mother on a roof. His father
Right.
gets him up at night. It's like, come on, Bobby, let's go say goodbye to your mom. She's on the roof. She's about to
Oh, of course I did. Because
cash in.
why is he waking his son up to show him his mother about to kill herself instead of, I don't know, trying to get the woman off the roof?
Yeah, I know. How come people aren't like down there? Come on, you want to jump? Go ahead.
Yeah, like putting something out to. I mean, yeah, that whole story
A little bit.
was bizarre. So it's either something he dreamt after he knew what happened, after
or
he found
has
out his mother jumped off the roof.
horrible fucking family.
Which actually, again, when I was talking to my mom, she suggested that possibly because she thought there was something a little bit wrong with his brother. She said he's like so cold and strange and unemotional, and
But I think this is a family that's used to being cold and strange and unemotional. I really do. The separation, the emotional separation from Robert Durst and his family began when his father left him, did not leave him the company, left his younger brother Douglas the company, not him.
well, but is that what happened? Because there was this whole thing about how when he first married Kathie, he had a different business, but he had to return to New York to take over his father's business, and
That's
he ran
another
it for
thing.
18
He wanted
years.
to leave the family. He
Yeah.
did not want to be involved with the family. He ran a health food store?
Yeah, he was running a health food store with his wife, and they were living like happy hippies, and then suddenly he had to go back to New York to run the family business.
Yeah. Okay. So, cold, calculated method killer or sociopath with functional mental disease. That was a question I had watching this. Again, in his behavior, you really don't get this indication. He kind of strikes me as just he's almost likable. He's almost a likable schmo, just existing in New York City. He reminds me of every New Yorker I ever run across.
Really, I didn't. I think if I saw him in person, I'd find him fairly creepy. But okay.
You can only find him creepy because of the circumstance. If you actually,
the twitching eye, and he doesn't really
Okay.
quite make eye contact. He's
and I said something about the twitching eye. What I wanted to say was that he wears glasses mainly. I've seen him in most of photographs, video. He was wearing glasses. He doesn't wear glasses in the interview, which tells me that he's wearing contact lenses. His eyes are incredibly dilated. You can't even see any color in them.
yeah, they were really dilated.
And so his eyes are twitching. I think he has that weird tick because of the contacts, because they hurt. Contact lenses hurt. I know this. And also the lights. I'm going to guess bright lights in your face when you're being interviewed. That's what I'm thinking. But other than that,
I've seen people being interviewed before. They don't all come off that way, but okay.
what he's also old, isn't he? Isn't he in his late 60s or
The 70s, probably.
70s?
Yeah.
So what are we looking at? I'm still convinced there is darkness in his mind, some creature of violence, aroused and disturbed. What is he? Even after part 6, what do you see there? And how it ends, it ultimately ends. The documentary kind of ends on an anticlimactic note because we're left to fill in the blanks, because we know what happens. He's arrested.
Right.
So
I don't know. I mean, yeah, I hope we do get to find out more about him. Maybe not in documentary format.
there was one more thing. Okay, now this I hesitate to bring up, but it seems awfully convenient that the movie gets this enormous amount of press at the end of part 6 with Robert Durst getting arrested. They had this evidence. This movie was made. It was done.
I figured, yeah.
It was done for a while. He gets arrested on, last week. All right, so it's like I mentioned a little bit of this to Andrew, right? And he's like, it sounds like the now, from what I understand, the filmmakers sat on this evidence because they were advised by their lawyers. The thing is, when I mentioned this to Andrew, he said that sounds like obstruction of justice.
Yeah, it would be if that were really true.
So, what do you think? A little conspiracy here
Conspiracy on whose part?
on the part of the filmmakers, I'm going to say. Wouldn't it be really awesome if we interviewed this guy, right? And then when we're broadcasting it, he gets arrested.
So how exactly did they... You mean they didn't release what they knew until
I
close
didn't
to the
hear
time
a
when they were
damn
going to
thing about
release the
this
documentary?
until this final part aired.
There could be, yeah, there could be. I mean, unless he was just really, really hard to find in New Orleans. But in this day and age, no one's really hard to find.
Okay, we're going to wrap it up. You have any final thoughts?
No, not really. But the documentary left me with more questions than answers. Let me
I guess
say
that's
that.
a good thing.
I guess, yeah. And the cat came back. So.
The very next day. Siren, you want to say bye? Yeah? You want to say goodbye? How you doing? Okay, that is the end of this special emergency episode of BlissVille. The Jinx. The title of this episode, and Bronwyn will be pleased and amused by this, but the title of this episode is Your Conscience Will Be Mine Even Though You Fool Your Soul.
That's awesome. Thank you very much.